put my stuff down. It's right after lunch. Everybody still awake out there? Okay, get a flashback. Thank you. Okay. Well, I don't know about you guys, but who would think that discussions on dynamic pricing techniques would be so interesting, right? We heard from these guys some really interesting stuff. And we'll bring up our simplified model again. You've got it on your tables. You know, I look at this like taking the capability of being able to stand on the shoulders of giants, learning from other people's experiences, using these implementation guides to simplify your experiments in dynamic pricing. You know, we talked about it in the NGS section, experimenting, failing fast, learning how to do stuff. It's really going to help us move forward as an industry. I think Aldo's story, we did meet over a coffee, you know, 4 months later, 2,600 new price points. Really interesting. Amit, go get some Cambridge Analytica logic into your revenue management systems, put it on autopilot, nothing will go wrong. And then Adam, and that was a joke, sorry. And then with Adam, the complexities, you know? And this is something I love about this model, and if you look on your sheets, you know, far left-hand side is today, moving across as we add more and more capability, getting across to continuous pricing, which is where we're going to talk about next. And there is a real opportunity in continuous pricing to simplify a lot of the capabilities, a lot of the underlying systems that could do this, but it's going to take reinvestment. We at ATPICO are trying to guess what this looks like. I'm in R&D. We have to put a 10-year vision together about where we think we're going. And this model, it could be way wrong. But there's a lot of things we think are going to happen as we get closer towards continuous. The concept of moving, as Tom said, away from fares to product, having product be the thing that defines us from a retailing perspective of what I'm putting into market. That's my new distribution point. The control of knowing who I'm going to share my content with and how I control that. In a decentralized system, we call that the airline profile. How will that evolve? And then the entire concept of where my offers and orders live. I need to have continuity. With one order coming along, how do I have continuity of every offer I've made, every order I've got, the offer order store, and then how my DPE evolves, the component that's actually deciding price, and what enrichment services I'm going to build on top of that. Now, this is just a vision. We're going to iterate. We're going to evolve. We're going to do some trials in the next 6 to 12 months. We'll start small. We'll learn. But what I'm really interested to do in the next session is bring a couple of guys onto stage who are sitting at different sides of the spectrum on this. And what we're going to do is we'll have each one come on separately, talk a little about what they're doing, and then we're going to do a short panel section. Concept here is to look across to the future and say, okay, where are we headed to? So first of all, I'm going to bring up Sebastien. Sebastien Touraine is head of Dynamic Offers Group for IATA. Huge applause for IATA, please. Thank you. Why do we have to prompt for that? I don't know. And Sebastien is putting together the future state of where IATA sees dynamic offers coming to. So I'm going to hand the clicker to you, and I'll step out your way.
Thank you. So, good afternoon. My name is Sebastien Touraine. I work for IATA on the transformation department. My role in this kind of introduction to this session is to give the big picture of how the transformation agenda is moving along and how the world of offers and order will change, especially in the world of dynamic offers. So, first of all, thank you, ATPICO, for inviting IATA for this event. Let's look beyond fares, as it's a very controversial issue just to say in this room. Let's go back to the vision of airline retailing that the industry has with we go towards offers and orders. So we have this so-called NDC. So just let's remind you what is NDC. NDC is three things. First, it's API-based data communication standard. We all agree, heard this morning, that is quite critical. It's moving along. The second key thing in NDC, and that's actually the biggest game changer, the workflow in which airlines are presenting offers has changed. It's no longer fares and an availability compiled by an intermediary. Every shopping request comes to the airlines, and airline is responsible for presenting back a priced available offers to the consumer, the seller, via an aggregator. That's the biggest game changer. Not only the airline are in control of each single shopping request, but they also know who is asking as part of the shopping request. Context is quite critical. The third thing that NDC is bringing is putting together this kind of infrastructure or foundation for offer and order management, but it's still integrating a lot into today's PSS, passenger service system, with inventory, booking, ticketing, and DCS. That's the reality. But at least the foundation is there. So in this world, what sort of simplification could come? In a world where every shopping request comes to the airline and the airline presents an offer back, they don't distribute fares, they don't distribute booking class. So no longer you will be required to pre-file fares. No longer will you be required to have a booking class to respond to this kind of request. You respond to offers. So that was one of the topics we stimulated the discussion last year in the so-called IATA white paper. And my colleague Henry and myself were very pleased to present that at the last Air Symposium. So quite a key game changer in this area. In this area, absolutely no standards. It's up to each airline to define how they will create offers. But there is a role for IATA. But when this offers is accepted, it just becomes an order. So why would you retrofit that into a PNR and to an electronic ticket? That's actually the story about one order. Combining the records of PNRs and ticket and EMD in one single record for fulfilling the requirement for tracking services and accounting and delivering some of these services. So this is basically the vision that the industry has for a world of offers and orders. Having said that, my role now is really to focus on the future of dynamic offers in the industry. As Tom was mentioning, we had a working group this year, a focus group with several airlines, seven system providers, to look at what is the definition. Because what we learned so far is that there was quite a bit of confusion in the industry about dynamic pricing, dynamic offers. Because dynamic pricing, if you think about it, airlines have been doing that since 40 years. They were doing that via availability, and the availability is actually the real-time price decision, and then in parallel, you obviously have your fare and your pricing to segment your market. But the real-time availability is actually the way just to change the price. That's actually at the bottom left of the chart. But what is important in this kind of framework, conceptual framework, nothing is going to be answered by this graph, but you have multiple ways of determining or presenting price through to your customers. If you look at the price determination, it could be as today with predefined price points, or it could move into the price adjustment, or to a world where there won't be any file fares anymore in the fully dynamic price. And same thing on the product side. You will have different level of ability just to create bundles, multiple, up to the level of, for every single shopping request, you may create a specific bundle or a specific product. So these two things come together and bring together this, let's say, dynamic offers in the end state vision. Two key parameters to move into this journey. The first one is the ability for airlines to control their distributed offers. What I mean by that, how much ability you as an airline have to control your offers on direct sales and through the NDC workflow. That's quite critical. You are in control of distributing offers. The second key area is that the application of shopping context we said is key. You have all the information so that you could tailor-make your offers. So in terms of benefits, you could clearly see that if you go from the bottom and go to the top on the right side, you basically have quite some benefit to optimize your price, continuous price point, and that is something that airlines are aiming for their own benefits, revenue benefits. If you look at it from the top, bottom to the top, it's basically a more, let's say, a customer benefits in increase in conversion. So that's more or less the definition we're putting together at industry level, and we'll continue to talk about that to monitor the industry capability. And Exactly. So just come on stage, just to summarize what are the big evolution in the past 40 years. We, as an industry, invented yield management. We need to be proud of that. This evolved into this O&D, revenue management, and merchandising. And down the next step is dynamic offers. And I'm very pleased just to discuss with you as part of this panel on this topic.
Sorry to rush you along, but we've got a time limit and people want to ask us questions. Okay, next up.
Would you let me sit down?
You can sit down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, why don't you sit down? Sure, you can sit here. All right, next up, we're going to bring up, a quick round of applause for IATA. That's enough. All right. I'd like to introduce Marcial up here. Marcial's going to talk a little about the challenges that American Airlines has. Sebastian's very much focused on the future, where he thinks we should all get to. Some of us have to live in the real world.
Right. Challenges or opportunities?
Opportunities. Nothing but opportunities.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for inviting me back. I was here, I think, last year. Some of you, I don't know, apparently when you talk about dynamic pricing, you get invited back. I have a couple of points, I think, today that I might not be here next year. We'll see how this goes. All right, first, I'll talk a little bit about sort of the challenges that we face at American Airlines, and really what this slide is trying to illustrate is that we are obviously a domestic carrier, or a large domestic carrier, large international carrier, but 2/3 of our revenue comes from the domestic network. So I'll give you just an idea here. Obviously, we're all up in DC. We, on average, at American, have about a couple hundred different ways to get you from DC all the way down to LA, right? That's every day. So when we think about pricing and yield management, we have to figure out how to make sure that we offer the right price to the right customer at the right time. What this means, if you translate it, the size of our carrier is about 50,000 O&D pairs, 10 itineraries on average per day, 331 days of a selling horizon. That means 180 million price points. Now, I don't mean filed fares, but I mean these are the prices that we manage effectively on a daily basis. Okay? That's just the start. Now, if I take the American Airlines product segmentation model, where we sort of say that we have a set of different products that we try to tailor to each of our customers, starting at the very left from basic economy to our economy product. We have something called main cabin extra, which is sort of in between. We have a premium economy, a domestic first, a business, and a flagship first product. So all of a sudden, I've just taken our product, sometimes we refer to it as fare families, and made the problem more complex. So now take the picture on the previous slide, where you have 200 plus itineraries, you have a bunch of different products out in the world, and now I have to try to figure out how to sell this, right? We had a couple of folks today up here from revenue management. I think Amit's presentation was very, very sort of salient with me, because it talks about the real sort of difficulties that we face. First, why do we even bother doing this? In my mind, there's two cases for it. One is from an airline perspective. A lot of folks mentioned this is all about upsell. And retailing is about sort of upselling. In revenue management, the way I think about the problem is kind of the opposite. I need to create offers for customers so they don't buy this product, right? There's the age-old saying that anybody can get load factor. For some reason, all these discussions about dynamic pricing, we always hear about discounts. When do we talk about yield? I'm still waiting for that presentation to happen, by the way. So if anybody wants to take me up on that challenge, I'd love to see it. In addition to that, we also think about the customer. Again, I'm not a big fan of the word upsell, because I believe we create a basic economy product for the customer that wants a basic economy product. This customer might be flying with one of our competitors who is also primarily targeting basic economy type of customers, and I want to be competitive with that. I also want to offer basically let's call it a business product for the customer that is willing to buy a business class fare. So we believe that this is about product segmentation for all the different customers that exist in the world. So I promise I don't have a lot of slides. This is very much the last one, except for, I think, again, I'm trying to drive home the point that if I now take those products that you saw in the previous slides, our aircraft on average have about 100 seats. So take the math on the previous slide, multiply it by 7 products by 100 seats, and all of a sudden you're at 115 billion priced seats every day, right? That is what yield management and sort of pricing, when they come together, that is how many prices they control. The chief strategy officer, ADP Co., refers to this as static pricing. I think this is pretty dynamic. So, all right, I got some applause. All right, fantastic. So again, I might not be invited back next year, but the point is, I believe we already do what I consider dynamic pricing, in the sense of we have so many different options, so many different products out there. And the biggest question is, how do I manage these 115 billion price points for all of our seats out there? in my mind, there's a lot of juice left in the orange to squeeze when it comes to actually making your yield management and your pricing systems talk to each other. Right? If you're at an airline, go back to your RM departments and ask, hey, why do we have a yield management department and a pricing department? Why don't we have one integrated department? Do those systems talk to each other? If they don't, maybe that's the next step. So a lot of the focus for American Airlines right now is really focusing on a lot of the automation that ATPCO is making available. So the use of APIs, better fare automation, better fare product fulfillment, something that Adam mentioned. Fulfillment is difficult in this business. And that is really where our sort of immediate focus is. I'm not saying we're not thinking about the distant future when it comes to sort of dynamic offers and everything else. But I think, like I said, there's still a lot of juice in that orange, that we can squeeze out. So that's all I have for my official presentation. I guess now Q&A?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks. Oh, you keep a hold of those because you may go forward and backwards. Okay, so you all are aware we have the app. You can throw some questions in here. I'm personally, Marcial, I was super excited to hear your presentation. I now have juice in the orange to keep going. So let's kick this off with a simple question, right? You kind of like different remits. Sebastian's trying to push forward the industry to say, hey, here's the end state. Let's start thinking about the end state. And you see it very much, Sebastien, if I'm correct, as a sequential journey, right? There is an end state. And I think, Marcial, your position is, hey, we've got, I have a fairly sophisticated system and there's nothing broken today. Is that a fair position?
I don't know if I would say it's not broken. I think it has opportunity, right?
Okay.
So what I mean by that is kind of what I mentioned, which is the convergence of yield management and pricing is something that we've conceptualized. But I think unless anybody has sort of a solution for this, it's not something we've done really before. Example comes to mind is how often does your yield management system suggest that you should file a different price point? Right. That's an easy use case, but again, this is something that we're actively working on because I believe the next step in this evolution is really trying to tie those things better together, because the overall revenue upside for using existing infrastructure is higher. Meaning, I go back to Richard's point earlier, who's going to pay for all this? We're the folks from Delta. I hear they have a lot of money. So somebody's got to pay for all this. I'm just trying to figure out how do I use the current infrastructure better?
Oh, there's a question just come in from Delta.
Great.
So there is a lot of hype on this, and I think one of the things, Sebastien, your group is trying to do, and we're very dedicated to doing, is trying to demystify the hype around dynamic pricing. Even today, I'm engaged in a slight Twitter war with somebody who has very fixed opinion about what dynamic pricing is, why we're even talking about it, what's ATPCO talking about dynamic pricing for. It's irrelevant. It's very relevant. Yeah. What do you see the biggest challenge in terms of that hype cycle and your airlines you're dealing with?
So as I mentioned during my presentation, I think the word dynamic pricing exists since 40 years in principle. That's the raison d'etre of a revenue management department. But I will pick up actually on your challenge, which is let's say the total offer management. The fact that you have duplicated business rule within your inventory revenue management and your pricing department. So it's something that struck me the first day I was in RM 15, 20 years ago. Why are these guys in pricing are imagining any business rule, minimum stay, maximum stay, advance purchase, where the other guys in RM, in the inventory control, are actually ruling out this advance purchase by closing and opening some of the inventory. So it's more a process than science. So actually, the challenge is more on the process and on the vehicle to distribute your stuff and having the ability to get the best shopping context than the science, which is pretty robust, and we have a lot of people from MIT, from other areas. Do you agree?
Yeah, no, I actually agree with part of your statement, which is you're right. Today, you have some airlines that have pricing departments that are making decisions maybe a little bit of a silo from your yield management folks, right? And so I guess that's kind of what I'm sort of pleading for, saying, hey, by the way, how do we make better decisions together? Because again, I can use what I have today to make those better decisions, right? And I think you're 100% right in the sense of today, because we don't have that necessarily tight integration, we probably sub-optimize in a way, right? So.
And so when you add the merchandising guys, the digital e-commerce people, it's like a big reunion at the end. They should talk to each other, don't you think so?
Yes, idealistically, yes. I don't know how many people here are from large airlines, but we have. It takes a lot of coordination to get people kind of rowing in the same direction sometimes, right? And making that happen is partly my responsibility. Is trying to get folks to sort of get behind a strategy and kind of row in that same direction, right?
So IATA role. So you're coming across as more an advocacy kind of role to help the Marcials of this world sell internally, that the vision that you see is the right vision comes together.
So it's a very important point, and that's actually the last point I wanted to make in my presentation. The role of IATA in that
but we're cutting you short in your presentation,
okay,
so you can't talk about it. No, go on.
The role of IATA, as you said, is three things. It's first to build the awareness across the industry of the state of possible in the context of NDC and one order. Is to enable the transition, because there will be no one-size-fits-all, as Tom said. This will be an evolution, a journey for the industry, and there is no perfect solution that anybody, especially not IATA, will dictate. And third is like just to enable a future of interlining with offers. If there is no more booking class, fare filing, interlining will change. And that's some of the work that is currently being done. Started with NDC interlining, and that now we are taking over with the supplier retailers future MITA agreement, which Henry Coles and the airline distribution standard is working on.
Okay. So back to movie quotes. Show me the money. Where is the payback and all the investment, the infrastructure investment to go here? Marcial, how do you know if a new dynamic capability, a new form of dual RBD as you've implemented it, and now thinking forward to continuous and the investment that potentially comes with investment, how do you go about measuring improvements?
I think maybe I'm going to take the question and turn it a little bit upside down, because I think first you have to convince yourself in terms of why are we doing this, right? Yeah. And I believe, certainly, I've been in revenue management 8 years and change, and basically the biggest lesson I've learned is it's all about granularity, right? Mm-hmm. So what we are trying to do in revenue management, we're trying to steer our customers, right? Again, a lot of times we talk about revenue management about telling people not to get on this flight, but rather get on this other one because I've got better opportunity, right? So I certainly welcome the opportunity to become more granular in our decision making. But we have to make sure that our tools are up to snuff to make sure that they can take advantage of that granularity. Right? And so a lot of times when we try to put initiatives together to figure out how do we have tools that are able to exploit this granularity, when we go back to measure and say, well, overall revenue production is higher, well, even measuring that is difficult. Right? So I guess what I'm saying is, if you believe that granularity leads to success, which I certainly believe, then we should try to go down that path. I'm also going to put a plug in here for as long as we do it transparently.
Right, which brings me on to the next component. And Sebastien, I know we've talked about this before, but for the audience, transparency. Today we have a system that's fairly transparent. Airlines file products in advance. Those products are known about, and people can go purchase them. Government regulations, all those components are looked after. We have an ecosystem that kind of has a fairly transparent mechanism to pricing. We go to continuous pricing. Now the decision for price is being made in real time based on Cambridge Analytica or any other kind of component. What's the IATA position on that around transparency? How does transparency change?
So first of all, it exists today already. Like if you fly EasyJet or shop on EasyJet, there is no file fares behind, and it's not the only airline in the world that is doing that. But the framework in which we work with file fares and rules is enabling this transparency at a high level point of view. But a fare which is filed is just an indication. Is it going to be sold? That's another question. And that's where the analytics of, let's say, infare or type of things are into play, just to monitor your competitors and things like this. But in the future, you will have probably more price points. And I think that one of the idea that part of the dynamic pricing working group is to have min and max fare level, where behind it will be a request response on the specific price, is one way just to keep this transparency and keep this, let's say, structure in the market that is required.
Yeah, I think just to quickly follow up on that, which I guess I think of it from the perspective of we try to create transparency even today with the EasyJets of the world because we use products like infare, right? By the way, they're not cheap. Right? No, I don't know if infare is here or not, but the point is any data provider at the end of the day doesn't do things for free, right? So as we think about sort of what the future of data collection means. This is certainly something that my group is very much actively thinking about and having discussions with various providers on. But we want to have sort of that insight in the market, into the marketplace. ATP provides part of that today, certainly for the domestic US business and US point of sale. And then we try to supplement that with a lot of other data sources because we do need that global visibility, if you will. Right? But again, it goes back to, at some point, right, I have a certain amount of budget that I can spend on this. And sometimes I fear that it keeps growing because of the fact that we make things more opaque.
And there is something which is also quite surprising in this industry, that you as an airlines need to pay a third party to monitor your own fares or your own price on the market, and including different OTA and things like this. It's probably the only industry where, at the end, because of the number of complexity around, you need to monitor what Expedia has been selling on you, where you are the generators of the price originally. But that's the beauty of our booking class, filing environment.
Okay, so we're coming close on time. I guess if you have some ideas, concepts of where you think, as an industry, we should be focusing our attention as we start thinking about continuous. I mean, we've talked a little about transparency in a world where the price is set at the time of offer, and now we need to start looking at what offers are made and what offers convert. You know, thinking a little about, okay, now I have to have new controls on who sees which offers. That was maybe something my indirect distribution partners looked after in the past. Now more control for you, or more challenges for you, right? And then at the flip side, you know, we're looking at the entire IATA continuum of NDC to one order, right? What do we think this world of continuous pricing looks like? When do we see the results of this? Is this a 5-year project, a 10-year project? You know, off the top of your head, where do you think this goes? Oops.
Who's going first?
Where is your crystal ball?
Crystal ball time. Yeah. It's only 8 years for NDC, so, you know, when do you reckon?
So I think we will take what Tom was saying. He's getting retired in 10 years, so we'll say for the next 10 years.
So as long as Tom is here, we're good. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think at the end of the day, this is a long journey, and to me, actually, that's the exciting part about this business, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. The whole reason I think we're all here is because we think the travel industry is fascinating, right? And we will continue to evolve it, and we will find ways to sort of create a better experience for our customers, because I think sometimes we lose that a little bit to sort of say we focus on dynamic pricing and how do we distribute our product. But at the end of the day, we're trying to make it easier for our customers to interact with us. As long as we don't forget that, I think then put those things first, and the rest will come, so to speak. The sort of continuous pricing in my mind, I think, I could be wrong, but at least 8 to 10 years before we think we can actually get to a purely continuous pricing world.
Okay.
I think one last point. I think people sometimes ask themselves, is offer creation completely separate from fulfillment and distribution? We heard from Adam that fulfillment is a problem. So if you create more richer offer, more complex offers, you will need to have like simple fulfillment. And we know that the EMD has been a constraint for the airlines. And the same thing on distribution. You need the shopping context to create better offers, more targeted, more tailor-made for the customers. All that are interlinked. So that's why the agenda on transformation, I think it's clearly these offers and orders in the new distribution capability context.
Perfect. Well, we are over on time, so I'm going to wrap up. I do have this really good question pointed at me, which is, I'll read it verbose. Come on, Gianni, does ATPCO generally think that having 140 million filed fares, most of which are never sold, brings customers transparency? Of course we do. No. What we believe is that in the world of continuous pricing, we transplant the 140 million fares with millions and millions of offers, and those offers become more and more diverse. So either way, we're looking at a big data challenge on understanding where we're going with pricing. With that said, I'd like to thank my panel. Thank you very much, Marcial. Very good. And thank you, Sebastien.